right, and we're back, episode two.
Welcome back, everyone. All thousands of viewers, I'm sure we have by now.
Yeah, something like that. But we're just talking about Europe. Yeah, go ahead and say what you were saying.
Yeah, I don't know. So I just came upon this TikTok. So there's a lot of people in Europe who are upset right now, like places like Barcelona with the tourist economy. It's like, oh, think about like the actual citizens. Like we're overran in the summer hours with tourism. We can't enjoy our cities to ourselves. And this guy's taken the opposite viewpoint. Pretty sure he's American. He's like, Europeans just have to accept they are our Disney World at this point. He's like, they don't create anything anymore. Like they're like this it's frozen in time of, from centuries ago when they were colonizing the entire world and built these incredible plazas and piazzas. Like they just have to accept that tourism is their biggest sector of their economy. What do you think about this, Richie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've never been to Europe, so I'm one to talk, but it does kind of seem, my girlfriend's there right now, and it does kind of seem like it's just, they've got a lot of art, a lot of history, a lot of probably good food, I imagine. That's another thing too, is that everyone who goes to Europe always comes back and has somehow lost 30 pounds and did not change any lifestyle habits.
This
So
is
they've
this
got
is
something going with the food. At least they're not poisoning their food. But I
this
mean, when it
this
comes to
this
like,
this is everything, dude.
yeah, well, when it comes to like production, yeah, like, I don't know what they're producing on the global in the global economy. Really, I'm sure they've got their things they're doing, but yeah, at least they're not poisoning the food. That's a plus if you're in Europe. So
I, I
you got
want
some
to
things going at least.
I want to piggyback off that. People say like, "Oh, I'm lactose intolerant. I have a gluten allergy." I went to Europe. I drank beer. I drank beer. Had wine and pizza for 2 weeks straight. I lost 15 pounds. Now, this can be a several different factors. One, they have walkable cities in Europe, so
True.
they actually move around throughout the day. When you're on
Probably putting
vacation,
a
you tend to move a little bit more anyway, sightseeing, things like that. But also the diet. Did you catch RFK's speech the other day about like chronic diseases,
oh
things
yeah,
like that being probably all responsible because of our diets, because of our
oh yeah.
irresponsible farming practices?
Yeah, no, I was listening to it live. I was at work, but that was a killer speech. It was so good that CNN and MSNBC had to cut him off halfway through. That's how you know it was a he was throwing some zingers in there. But yeah, I think he's right too about what they're saying with the food. Read a little bit into it. My mom is super into it. She started her own side company. Maybe we'll plug it on the pod, but she started her own side company for this exact reason where she's like, rather than using big pharma products or like all these like corporate products. It's all natural healing stuff. But she's been telling me that since I was a little kid about all the food, and for a while I just brushed it off. But it does seem like a problem. You look at the ingredients in something that people are eating all day every day, and there's it looks like a science experiment in there. It used to be you have flour, sugar. Now you're looking at ribonucleodextide, some nonsense. Like what the
Right.
hell is that? So. But yeah, that's definitely a problem. And I mean, the fact that RFK is out there saying it, there's a lot of people pissed. You can kind of tell.
Even bigger problem, everyone can look at a bag of Cheetos and say, all right, obviously this probably isn't good for me. I don't see a Cheeto tree out in nature. You can assume it's highly processed and thus probably not good for you. That being said, if our fruits and veggies and our grain, it isn't produced the right way, it's doused in pesticides its entire life, things that like we haven't been able to do long-term clinical trials of over generations, seeing how this affects our bodies in actuality. We know it helps the crops grow, but we don't know what else it does.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it really is kind of new technology, even though we don't really think of it like that. When you think of technology, you think of like phones and, you know, devices, but
You don't think of
all of this
GMOs.
right. Yeah. These chemicals are all technology. Same with pharma, like medicine. This is all just new technology that we have really, yeah, there's no long-term studies to tell what it is. And there is correlation. I mean, there's some studies that show correlations with, I know it sounds like conspiracy theory, and RFK has been saying it for a while. People are calling him a conspiracy theorist, but there is some studies that are, showing you've got like upticks in all of these, kind of like mental diseases and ADHD, autism, stuff like that, and it correlates perfectly. Now, correlation does not equal causation, of course, but it does correlate perfectly with the rise in all of these the UPFs, the ultra processed foods, where it's all this new stuff that they're just injecting in the food, and they have good reason to do it, at least kind of, is if you want all right, we live in Chicago. If you want like fresh strawberries,
Right.
there's really no such thing as fresh strawberries on a mass scale. So there's got to be a way to preserve them long enough to ship them across the country, and so that's what all these chemicals are doing. Which it helps the food companies. It helps us be able to get a wide variety of foods. But then at the same time, who knows what it's doing to your health? I know everyone's got trouble focusing, just in our generation, there's tons of problems that haven't been, and there's a that's the other thing too, is there's a lot of things it could be attributed to. It could be attributed to the fact that we have a computer in our pocket at all times or something like that. Could also be the food we don't really have any way of knowing. So it is kind of a tricky situation there.
There's so many factors of our lives changing so frequently.
Hmm.
You know, 20, 20, 30 years ago, me and you probably would have never talked again after high school, or we would
True.
have seen each other a couple more times. Like you can keep in touch with anyone that you want. It's an incredibly useful tool. And there's other things, in terms of like farming that we're able to do now that 100 years ago would just completely blow their minds. And it's progress, absolutely. It's just one of those things that you have to observe the progress. It's like, all right, if we can have strawberries in January, but maybe the strawberries, give you cancer, you know, obviously one of
Yeah,
those
I mean,
things, obviously one of those things you have to like dive into, and these safeguards might not be in place for us is the problem. Like the food and drug regulating companies are essentially all connected to each other. They have interlocking, incentive systems, things like
oh
that,
yeah,
and they're
that was
they're
a
they're
crazy one. The thing you showed me the other day about how like the FDA comes I think it was the RFK speech
yeah,
who
they
was saying
was.
how
Yeah,
yeah, the FDA is basically they're basically paid by the food companies to approve their food. 50% of their donations come from these food companies, and then they came out to defend themselves. Like, oh no, that's a lie, fake news. It's actually only 47%. So it's
that
like, all
that
right,
that one was incredible.
yeah, that's insane. And yeah, that's no one's talking about that type of stuff. Everyone's talking about nonsense, the usual clickbait kind of quick outrage culture of online, and no one's actually talking about the real stuff. That's why it was kind of a historic moment. RFK just addressing the nation, and I mean, he hit a bunch on the head. I didn't really listen to I had the whole speech on. I was kind of half listening to some of it, but I mean, he really you know hit a lot of sensitive topics when it comes to what the media normally likes to push. So it was good to hear. It's good to see
Well,
stuff
then
like
let's
that.
let's move into that media that you just said. It's how we've become sensationalized topics. Me and Richie both started watching a documentary called "The Rise and Fall of the Media." It goes through like the history. Starting with essentially like you know clay tablets, moving on to like the printing press, and this YouTube video was saying, it used to be long form, informative articles, right? Like the text was small, long paragraphs explaining actual topics, and how over time, even like magazines from the tabloids, say like 20 years ago, those People magazines of just huge pictures, huge text, moving on to will John and Kate have their fifth baby, instead of you know something important such as like new tax codes, things like that. And it's just super interesting to see that over time how the media is starting to like really focus in on some of the worst aspects of our psyches, the fear mongering aspects, the panic, uh
Yeah, what do
making
they call? They were saying that channel's good too. I've seen that guy. We should drop the link in the bio as well. Then and Now is the name of the channel. That guy's awesome. I've seen a few other documentaries he's made. They were super good, really good. But I think it was the moral panic basically is what is. It sounds like a bad thing. It kind of is a bad thing, and that's the goal of a lot of media companies is to cause a moral panic where there's like some outrageous, whether it's some bad guy basically, the Grim Reaper, whether that's a pandemic or a Trump or a whatever it is, a
Entire
natural disaster.
ethnic group.
Yeah, right, yeah, whatever it is, like the whole goal of the media is to cause a community wide kind of panic where they're freaking out because they know that fear sells, they know that anger sells, and their goal is not to inform you; it's to keep you glued to the TV, which is that's one thing too with like social media. We were talking about last week, and people have talked about this a long time, where they always throw around the phrase, if something's free, then that means you're not the customer, you're the product, and just
Mm-hmm.
and everyone kind of understands that nowadays about social media. That's not really new. It seems new because it's more extreme, but that's pretty much the same thing that we're getting when we watch the news on the TV as well. Is we're kind of the product. We're being we're not paying to be informed. We companies are paying to be the ones who get to inform us, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
it is there is definitely an incentive misalignment when it comes to the the media, just the media industry in general.
And that channel also explained there used to be like well-funded public channels that it was a duty that there had to be at least a certain number of informational programs available to the public because there's only a certain amount of like bandwidth. Then bandwidth exploded and they like, didn't include those safeguards of just letting entertainment culture essentially run wild with this new form of media, kind of let
Yeah, it was
the
the '80s, the Reagan kind of deregulation phase in the '80s, where everyone basically opened up, and then yeah, now you get that was the one law, the I think it was the Fairness Act, something like that, where news stations at the time had to allow opposing viewpoints an equal amount of time on the program. So you wouldn't have CNN and Fox News. You'd have one station where they allow all the different kind of angles come in, right? Something like that.
mm-hmm. Another part of it was you know from MSNBC and Fox how essentially now they have absolutely zero incentive to inform anyone. Like their incentive now is to just entertain. Fox News, very recently had that lawsuit where they stated any serious uh, viewer of this program understands that it is entertainment. It's not like a news channel, and
Right.
they
Yeah.
said that in court.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. I remember when I first, as a teenager, first started paying attention, and it didn't take too long to start realizing that. And that it also, especially during the first Trump administration and still ongoing, it does kind of seem almost like it's a Game of Thrones style prolonged drama series. Like I don't know if that's new or not. I know, prior to like 2015, I wasn't really paying attention. I was, a young kid, but it does kind of seem like that when, especially during the election seasons, it's like sometimes it's not even about it is more entertaining than anything. Like it's like, all right, you feel like they leave you on a cliffhanger and then you go to bed, you wake up the next day and they're like, oh, well, what's Trump doing now? Or what's, that type of where it's more so it was like this, and that's all hyped up by the media. They time it all perfectly. And that's got to be by design. I got to imagine.
And let me tell you one thing. One of the most electric parts of politics I've ever been a part of was Trump's Twitter when he was president, dude.
Oh
Like
yeah.
he
Yeah, that
would
was insane.
tweet out some crazy shit and it gets sent in your group chat like, "Oh, what did he just say?" Like,
That was a good Andrew Schultz had a good bit where he was talking about that. It was in the heart of the Biden presidency, and he's like, yeah, honestly, so I'm gonna botch it, but he's like, yeah, honestly, kind of miss Trump a little bit. No, like the group chats were popping back when he back when he was in.
like entertainment wise, that man is on top. He's an entertainer if nothing else. Like he knows how to get the people going.
Yeah, he's basically a late night talk show host who's just decided to just he really pulled a real Leroy Jenkins on the whole political kind of thing. You got all these guys, especially in the Republican Party too. You got kind of a bunch of like milk toast Mitt Romney type characters up there, and then you just get this
Oh,
absolute
dude,
madman
his
rolling
his
in.
his nickname game is off the charts as well.
Honestly, does he have one for? I've been seeing Comrade Kamala
I all I've
pop up a
seen
couple times.
is laughing Kamala Harris, and he can do
Laughing
better.
Kamala's kind of good, honestly.
He
But
can
no,
do
I
better
was
than
gonna
that.
say he's starting to get a little weak with him. I feel like Comrade Kamala's all right just because of the alliteration.
Tampon
Um,
Tim's pretty good.
all right, yeah, Tampon Tam's pretty damn good. But no, one so there was a thing. It is kind of interesting now that he's on True. Well, I just saw he's back on Twitter, but for the past while he's been on True
Is he
Social.
tweeting again?
Just not nearly as much because he's putting all of his
Elon's
shenanigans
been
on
on
True.
his hands and knees begging for Trump to
I
come
know.
back for years.
So basically now if you look at Trump's Twitter, he's got some activity, but it's mostly it's like fairly reasonable tweets. It looks like, not very much different than, say Biden's Twitter or Kamala's Twitter. But
Dude,
that's because all of his shenanigans are going on Truth still. So if you go on Truth Social, it's like it's basically Trump's old
it's
Twitter.
very clearly him. I
Yeah,
was
right, right.
like a couple weeks ago. I forget when exactly this aligned with Biden getting absolutely embarrassed in the debate, or with it. This was before or after. It's probably after because I noticed this. But there was a Biden tweet chain. Literally, it was like 12, 14 tweets long, and it was very long, well thought out sentences. And I'm like, this is just very clearly not Joe Biden saying this. So like,
Yeah, he's
who
sounded
is
way too competent.
who
Wait,
is who is saying this? Like, who is sitting behind like the president's Twitter? Is it literally like some guy like me and you
it's
who's
it's got
literally
to be,
like
yeah.
some
It's
like
probably like some intern.
some nepo baby intern literally is just like in control of the most powerful man in the world's like social media account?
Probably, honestly, it's probably some like media studies intern or something who are a team of people who are just kind of, yeah, they're basically using it as, which makes sense. The fact that Trump was allowed his own Twitter for so long and managed to, I mean, I guess who's going to take it from? But like, looking at these establishment politicians, this campaigns are basically businesses, and you're not just going to let the one, you're not just going to like let one guy, especially like an old kind of senile man, just have full access to the Twitter. I feel like there's too many people who are involved who've got money on the line, where they're running it the same way as like a corporate, that like
So
Wendy's or something.
let me ask you this question then. Does this lend which side do you think this adds more credence to? The side that there is like a cabal of powerful individuals controlling things behind the scenes, or that there's actually not a group of people controlling things behind the scenes
No,
because there's literally
it's
probably some intern named Jimbo running that Twitter account.
no, I mean that was one thing too. I remember when Trump was president, it was he there was like it was a lot of like conspiracy stuff where it was he would kind of hint at or imply like, oh, this deep state, and I remember the main for a while the main conversation was going on was like, oh, is there really a deep state? Like, is the president not actually in charge? Because that would be like terrible, like we voted for the president. He's not the one running it. Like there can't really be a deep state. And Trump was out there and like all the Trump supporters were saying, yeah, he's going to take down the deep state, drain the swamp. And everyone's like, oh, is there a deep state? I don't know. That sounds like conspiracy. Like, no, that would be too dark. That would be too, crazy. And then during Biden's presidency, it was like, oh God, I hope to God there's a fucking deep state.
Right. Well,
I hope
but
there's somebody else running this shit.
so what do you think? What do you think though?
I think there is a deep state. Depending on what that means. They always kind of throw up it's like a shadowy kind of thing. I think what the deep state really is a bunch of unelected bureaucrats that have slowly over the past 60 years just kind of accumulated power through these three-digit acronyms that you see. Like, CIA is probably you've got probably a lot of the major decisions are going through CIA or similar organizations that are actually the ones
The
running it.
alphabet boys.
The alphabet boys, exactly. And I feel like that's really what it is. And then, president gets inaugurated, he gets briefed, and it's basically, you know, here's how it is, not much you can do about it. And then, he's got to play within their rules, kind of, is what it seems like. What do you think?
I go both ways. I kind of think at a certain point there has to be some form of big interest. Like there has to be
Super
some
PACs and
some conglomerate of influential and wealthy people who have more say than us. To a certain extent, that has to be true.
yeah, I would
On
say
the
so.
on the other hand, where power resides is an incredibly difficult thing to pin down.
Could it be, I was thinking this the other day watching that documentary, could it be that the media are the ones who are really pulling the levers? Because if you think about it,
The fourth estate.
politicians have no power at all. They are totally the media can pick and choose who they want to prop up, who they want to put down. The you know all politicians are tied to the media. They're subservient to the media. If the media, if the and there's only a handful of when we talked about last week about the oligopolies, I think media is a big one. And when we talked about
Yes. Yes.
the network effect stuff too, media is one where I would be as much of a free market kind of pro capitalism guy as I am, the media is one where it would be a good conversation. Should that be all right? We take away the we heavily regulate it so that it's not just a couple guys who control everyone's minds basically because it's starting to get that way. I guess social media is the antidote a little bit, but
Yeah, or just have like both essentially. Let anyone start a news program, a podcast, social media, let anyone start it. Competition is good, but then maybe there should be a government sanctioned one, that's like, oh, here's where the US government at least stands on this position,
yeah,
like
the government sanction one. See, yeah, I mean the government sanction
because
one
then it's like,
scares
all right,
everybody.
but then it's like, all right,
Like,
maybe it's not completely and utterly true. They're spinning it their own way, but at least we're getting their spin on it, like
yeah, it seems like that's the way we're headed. And honestly, all of the like right now, you think of the media and you think of all the division on social media, and it seems like it's heading in a negative direction. But could this be just like the growing pains of how we transform society into a better society? Where right now you've got the establishment media narrative, then you've got the social media narrative. They tend to conflict. Everyone's kind of at each other's throats a lot, especially during these elections. Should we be kind of in a turning point where you know, soon as our generation kind of ages, the establishment media kind of gets wiped out, and now you've got a vast sea of different sources.
it looks like
And
that's where it's headed, right? I mean,
yeah,
how
right.
many
Maybe there's a
people
light at
our
the end of the tunnel here,
how many
honestly.
people our age do you know that watch the news?
The only time I do is for like satirical purposes, honestly, just to be like, yeah, like look how
Look how
terrible this is.
ridiculous
Yeah,
this
yeah, they
is.
look like idiots up
This
there.
is not news. Like none of this is news.
Right. Yeah,
But
exactly.
but then it's like, how many people do you know listen to some form of podcast or influencer or
Yeah, I mean, I do on a
every
daily
day?
basis.
Yeah,
And
every day.
and I mean, I'll be listening to it at work. That's the thing about like Spotify and these podcast streaming apps is, I mean, mainstream media is like, I picture mainstream media is like, you know, middle-aged dad comes home from work, has a family dinner, sits on the couch, throws on half an hour to an hour of the news, and then goes to bed. Versus these
Hmm.
podcasts, it's like you're on the road, you got it in, you're sitting at your
You're at
desk at
work,
work doing some
right?
busy work. I probably listen 4 or 5 hours of podcasts a day on like on a slow work day.
Hmm.
So it's definitely, yeah. I mean, it's definitely coming to that point. I think, which I think could be a good thing. Honestly,
It,
we
it
could
sounds
see
like a
it.
great thing. It sounds like it's going to be a far different variety of opinions rather than you got like Fox and you got like Newsmax, or you got like MSNBC, CBS, NBC all spouting the same lines versus Fox and like whatever one other right leaning one there is. There's only two
Yeah,
things.
right.
There's only two different uh like ideologies you can hear from versus like the uh like bottom up approach to media, like from the people out. You can
Right.
get so
Yeah.
many different viewpoints.
I think the challenge now, which wasn't a challenge before, because the new challenge that comes with having all these different viewpoints, and they all have basically everyone has a radio station now. If you were to compare now to the 1970s, 80s, where people were listening to the radio, watching the TV, it's basically like everyone has their own channel now. I think the hard part now is verification, which we've seen over the years of, is this true or not? And
Well,
who decides?
AI deep fakes are about to throw
And that's
that
going to be
whole thing
insane.
into
Yeah.
an absolute frenzy as well. I mean, think about
Yeah.
how easily you can fool like your grandparents with AI right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of those videos of people doing that.
So easily.
And it's only going to get better and better until
Yeah.
it's like
Better and
I had
better
this
and
theory.
worse and worse.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, better and better quality, worse and worse
Yeah.
for us.
Yes.
But I've been throwing this theory around for a while. I don't know if I've mentioned it to you before, but I have a prediction. I'm gonna throw it down right now. If it happens, I'm almost positive it's going to happen. So every major election, there's always an October surprise, at least for the past couple since I've been paying attention. The October surprise meaning, you know, campaigns are holding on to the dirt they got on the other guy, and they're waiting until end of October, a week or so before the election, and then they drop the bomb, and in hopes that that'll swing the election. Example was in 2016 the Trump tape where he's the grab her by the pussy thing, and then Hillary had there was something, the WikiLeaks thing with Hillary. They just threw those out in October to try to mess with their elections at the last minute. 2020, it was the Hunter Biden laptop. They tossed that one out there second half of October. My prediction is that this October, there's going to be some October surprises, but I'm betting that um, I think it's highly likely that whatever side, one of them is going to release some video footage or something of the other one doing something that's just insane. Like there's no way I can vote for this person after seeing them do that. Election is going to go on a couple weeks down the line. Or eventually we're going to find out that was an AI deep fake and that they never actually did that. That's my
That
prediction. So we'll see.
that would be that'd be wild. I saw a conspiracy theory that like a couple days after Biden announced he was dropping, which was hilarious, he just like sent out a tweet like
Yeah.
I'm out.
Do
Like
you think that was actually even him? I have a feeling that I have a
he
feeling
didn't
he might not have even known he dropped out until
he
like a
didn't I
couple
mean he
days
didn't
later.
write his resignation. That's for damn sure. He didn't write the tweet about his resignation. That's for damn sure. I
Yeah.
did Was that his decision? Who knows?
That one is
Was
tough.
that
I
the
don't know.
cabal of powerful people's decision? Who knows? Did they tell him he's dropping out? Did he decide to drop out? I don't know. But 3 or 4 days after that tweet that he was dropping out, people are like, we haven't seen Biden. Like
I know. I thought he was dead. I
he
was
hasn't
falling for
made
it
an
for a minute.
appearance. People thought he had a stroke or something. He makes a call in to
Yep, I know
Kamala
exactly where you're going.
having a rally, and he sounds super crisp, super clear, sounds really, really good. And
Yeah, way too good. Way too
everyone's
good.
like, this does not sound like the guy that just got dog walked by Donald Trump in the
Exactly.
debate. Everyone thought it was AI. And honestly, it sounded like AI to me.
No,
It's
I was down that too. I thought it was AI. I was texting the group chats like, "Yo, you guys gotta listen to this. I think this guy's dead,
yeah.
or they maybe have him held somewhere because it does not sound like him. It sounds way." And there was one point in when he was saying, and he started like rattling off names. He's like, "Yeah, I want to thank, Billy and Joey," and he starts like rattling off names so fast. He sounds like Ben Shapiro, and I'm like, dude, I haven't seen this man talk this fluently in years. It was crazy, but turned out he's still alive. At least we think.
And then the last part of that conspiracy is Kamala then goes at the end like, "Oh, thanks for
Yeah,
for the call, Joe." And everyone's like, "Oh, she was gonna say recording." Like,
true. Yeah,
I don't
I
know about
forgot
all
about that
that.
part. I
Uh,
forgot about that part. I do remember seeing clips. Oh yeah, we've got and stuttering. I do remember that. All right, let's cut to a quick break and come right back.
Sounds good.
All right. All right, and we're back here. So, speaking of Kamala, I know last week we were talking saying that barely any policy has been spoken about, specifically economic policy. I did just see earlier today her campaign did release some of her economic policies. Have you seen these yet?
No, let's hear him.
Hey, I got them right here. The Some of them I think are all right here. So middle class starts off with middle class tax cuts. A new $6,000 child tax credit for families with children in the first year of life. I think that's a good one. I think
Sounds good. If you want us to have kids, give
yeah,
us some incentive to have kids.
I'm a fan of that. Exactly. Incentivize kids. I like
Yep.
that one. Same thing. Cut taxes by up to 3,600 per child for middle class families. I like that one. Cut taxes up to 1,500 tax credit for frontline workers in lower income jobs. I don't.
No, no, no,
I'm fine with that.
no
I don't.
problem with that. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything too drastic about that. Um, Extending $6,000 per year in savings on Affordable Care Act health insurance premiums. That one I'm also kind of indifferent on.
No,
Um,
no idea how to react to that one. To be honest,
yeah,
I don't really know enough about our healthcare policies aside from the fact that I would like it to work differently than us having the most expensive healthcare in the world.
that one I could go. I can go into the whole kind of thing. I'd have to think a little bit more on that one actually, but yeah, I kind of agree. Here's where these are where I start to be like, oh, now going on to housing costs. Provide a historic $25,000 in down payment support for first time homeowners. I hate that one. I think that one is absolutely terrible. I,
25 sounds like a lot.
I mean, if we're gonna offer, if the government is gonna pay for, this is exactly how the 2008 housing bubble. It's a very similar concept of we're offering products to people who can't afford the products, saying like, okay, here, we'll just buy it. That's not gonna. I don't think that's gonna help anybody because if anyone who wants to buy a home is now offered $25,000 from the government, new money, new printed money. Here it is to go buy the home. What happens is the home price just goes up and no one saves anything, I think.
Yeah, no, it's the 2008 crisis was fundamentally started by predatory loan companies giving out far too many loans to far too many people who couldn't afford it, collateralizing these loans,
Yeah, not
and
having any risk.
not having any risk, saying they were AAA rated when they were full of subprime shit mortgages. Uh,
Yeah, that's a
kind
whole
of,
topic we can go into too. We could
I mean,
save that topic for another one too. But yeah,
that's a whole long form. We can do an entire probably hour and a half explaining
yeah, maybe we'll
2008, or we could
run that
just
one.
tell people to watch the movie The Big Short.
Yeah, I actually I started reading the book. I've seen the movie, started
Yeah,
reading the book. It's a little bit more. It's a little better because I it's a little bit easier to understand because they give you more detail, obviously. But it's also a little bit harder to understand because a lot of a lot of big financial terminology that's you know tough for
uh-huh.
a non financial man.
Yeah.
But anyway, as a couple more, I mean they go into some detail here. That when it comes to medical costs, cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month, and out of pocket expenses for prescription drugs at 2,000 for everyone. That's kind of another one where it's in theory I don't like it, but the way our system is already set up with the insurance companies, we're like so far away from a free market in that in that realm where it's like okay, I don't know how I have to think about that one a little more too. That's also probably another full episode. And then here's what we were talking about,
How would you feel about price fixing not to a certain dollar, but to a certain percentage?
like margin fixing.
Yes.
Um,
For
could
essentials like insulin.
could be, yeah. I mean that I I'll tell you, I right off the bat thinking about it, I like it a lot more than price fixing for sure. Which because that would solve that problem of what happens when the supply goes down and we can't even afford to sell it because we can only charge
Mhm.
less than we can you know we,
Well,
we can
this
only
is
sell it
this is
for
what
less than we can get it for.
this is literally what Cuban's trying to do. I'm sure you've seen this. He's starting his own like online pharma store essentially, and I think he has like a percentage that he takes. I don't know what it is, 30, maybe 40%, whatever cost it takes him to produce. He then just charges like a flat like 35 whatever percent
Mhm.
upcharge on it. So he's literally selling insulin for like $40, I think, something like that.
I think for medicine, that's probably a good idea. The thing is, I think about the free market is that is basically what we already have, but it's not government enforced; it's competition enforced. So like
But there's no
but
competition.
yes, exactly. When it comes to like big pharma and it's certain, I think in certain markets that might be a good idea, but overall, in a lot of free markets, I think that it's almost like why would the government do it? It's already there. I mean, a lot of these companies are making pretty slim margins as it is, and you'd be surprised to see like, I know construction firsthand is like the margins on projects are very, very slim, and just looking at like big stores and that type of thing. Um, but that's definitely a good discussion we can have as well. And then yeah, the last one is what we were talking about last week, lowering grocery costs. Advanced the first ever federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries. You already know I'm hard against that. Um,
I don't really, yeah, price gouging on groceries. It's hard to grasp for me that corporate greed isn't taking effect. And we talked about this last week, and you might be 100% right. I mean, grocery stores do make very, very low margins. Costco sells at cost. They make
mhm,
their money on their membership fees.
right,
That's
right,
that's
yeah,
that's their business model. You know, it.
yeah. Well,
I'm sure Walmart cannot possibly. Here's a really good one. I don't know if I sent this one to you. A guy tried to make. He did make. He made a chicken sandwich from scratch, completely from scratch. Meaning he grew his
I think I
own.
did see this.
He
Yeah,
grew his own hay. He raised chickens. Do you remember what the cost of one chicken sandwich was?
it was like a couple $100 or like $1,000 or something.
$1,500.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right,
so you
exactly. Yeah.
you you read that and then you think about, all right, paying $3 at Chick-fil-A actually isn't that bad. Like
No, yeah, right.
considering all of the man hours it takes to put into it. I think that was $1,500, not including his own labor. I think this took
Right.
like months and months of time. Growing hay, Richie, that takes
That's
forever. Like you have
Yeah,
to.
that's the beauty of it is like everyone hates on the big corporations, but that's why we're able to get everything so cheap. Like it's division of labor where it's like now instead of growing my hay and raising cattle and doing all this, I can just focus on like doing my job at my desk,
And
and
that's
then
that's why those memes of like, oh, we got to return to like hunter gatherer societies. People just do
no,
not do not
we
understand.
we wouldn't
It's a
even be
hundred.
fit.
It's a
We wouldn't even
hundred.
be. We would die immediately. None of
It's a
like
hundred degrees outside right now, Richie. I am sitting in a temperature controlled
yeah, right.
box, 72 degrees with Wi-Fi, speaking to someone 40 miles away with me instantaneously. And people would rather grow their own crops, wherein if like you didn't get enough rainfall in the springtime, you go without in the winter. And that's just hilarious,
I
ridiculous,
did, I did see
ludicrous.
an interesting theory. Speaking of hunter gatherers, okay, kind of a kind of a trick question, but do you think that we as humans are smarter now, or do you think humans back in the hunter gatherer days, 13,000 years ago, were smarter?
We are
And technology aside, so it's like not like I can.
humanity as a whole, we are the same physical beings that we were when we walked out of the caves 100,000 years ago. Now, on average, IQ is probably much higher than back then, just because of probably even just communication, just like being able to share ideas. Like 100,000 years ago, if the guy next to you and his wife and his kids had never thought of something, you would never have learned that thing. So overall, we have more information, but we're biologically the same creatures. Is my
So,
answer.
so yeah, you're on the money. The answer was that yes, like as a whole society, or like as the human race, we are obviously much smarter. We have much more access to information. We have much more like collective knowledge. But as individuals, we are much dumber. And the reason being is kind of what we were talking about, where back in the day, just to survive, you needed to have such a wide variety of skills and know how to do so many different things. You had to be hyper aware at all times. Like our threat, our means of surviving are so much easier now that our IQ has actually gone down. Like I don't know how to, I
Well,
wouldn't know how to like
it's different skill sets, though.
it's different
Obviously,
skill
a
sets, but
100,000
overall,
years
I think
ago, they're gonna know how to track deer better than I am. I also know the Pythagorean theorem. I can measure the distance between two places without ever going there. Like things of that aspect. I can't probably start a fire out of wet sticks though, like my
right, yeah,
ancestors could.
yeah, right. I think it's like overall just kind of I'd have to look back, but it was something along the lines of like variety of like they had like a better understanding of like I guess right survival, you know methods of survival, but they also had there was no guy who was who you could buy food off of, so you had to know which mushrooms were poison, which ones were good. You had to know like there was so much that they had to know. Where I think their overall like ability to memorize and compute was larger than it currently is now, especially too because we can just look it up
I
if we
mean,
need to.
maybe, but how many people in our generation can all quote the same exact SpongeBob lines? A lot.
True. Yeah, I mean, I guess
Like
that's
maybe we can't all identify the same funguses that our ancestors could, but I wumbo, you wumbo, he, she, it wumbo, wumbology, the study of wumbo. You say things like that, and it's a collective knowledge between us
I guess that is a good point actually. So maybe our collective knowledge is just focused on like less
on dumb
just
stuff.
on nonsense. Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
on
That
completely
does make
nonsensical
sense.
things.
That does make sense. Do you think in the future we do dumb down just because I mean we didn't have iPhones when we were watching SpongeBob. You think the kids who are raised with the iPads, iPhones eventually down the line, maybe their grandkids, they might by the time whatever they have, they might actually be just totally dependent on technology where they're unable to like if say
Yeah,
they're wearing headsets, if the headset goes
absolutely.
out, they're unable to even they can't even leave the house.
You're right. You're saying, could we go the path of Wally? Could we go the path of
Yeah.
idiocracy?
Yep,
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely, we could. Um, that being said, so like kids 50 years from now, when me and you are grandpas, when we're old timers, we're gonna look at them. We're gonna say, "Oh, these kids don't know nothing." That's just a universal thing. Have you seen? It goes. It takes paper clippings from the last like 200-300 years, talking about nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that one, but I have seen
It
some
goes
stuff.
back like every single decade. It's like, oh, kids are only focused on LSD and raves and Woodstock. And then before that, kids are only focused on cool muscle cars and going surfing. And then before that, kids are only focused on jazz and going to swing clubs.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that where everyone there was a quote from Mark Twain where he said the oldest thing about America is that something along these lines. The oldest thing about America is the habit of assuming everything is new. Meaning
Yeah.
like yeah, like everyone thinks like, oh yeah, this is a crazy time, this and that, but then it's like yeah, like they've been thinking that since the colonial times. So
And then one of my favorite ones on this topic, they found an Assyrian tablet from the year like 4000 BC, something like that. And in it, it writes, nobody wants to work anymore. The moral fabric of our society has collapsed. Everyone wants to be a painter or a poet. We do not adhere to the principles of our founding forefathers. So it's I think
That
it's
is
just
that's pretty
it's
hilarious,
it's just
actually.
a held belief that like the people who came before us were like the golden age, you know, and then everyone looks down upon younger generations and says like, oh, they're not up to snuff. When
Yeah, right.
progress has increased over time, you know, there's been dips in human progress. Obviously, you know, like we'll have an age of enlightenment, and then you know groups that are now like profanely called barbarians, you know, but we're really just more nomadic peoples would always tear down the civilizations, and then you'd have to wait a couple hundred years until someone else cropped up to, you know, reignite, you know, passions for like art and literature, things like that.
Yeah, it seems kind of cyclical where you have, you've got your, yeah, exactly. You've got your ups and downs, but overall it tends to go up. There's some good, Ray Dalio is a guy, he's got some good videos on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a pretty good take on that, how, empires kind of rise and fall and stuff. It's pretty interesting. But it all has to do with the kind of starting low, so it's after a catastrophe, say, World War II or something like that, where everyone's starting low. It has to do with the generations, where the generation who kind of comes up and rebuilds will then raise their kids to kind of take over and like take power in this new society. But then eventually, a couple generations down the line, those kids are just like so used to already having that power where they're no longer competent enough to hold the power, and then things kind of go down. So
hard
seems to make sense.
hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times.
Exactly. And I mean, it seems to me like America might be in that
We're in the weak men
we're
phase.
yeah, yeah,
We're
it definitely seems like we're in the weak men
creating
phase. I
hard
mean,
times.
if you look at even just like even up to politicians, I mean, I know it's still kind of the case. It definitely was a couple years ago where it's like you look at the politicians, they're all these like geriatric, like Mitch McConnell can't even finish a sentence. Joe Biden's obviously old as hell. Trump is old as hell. It's like, you
Oldest
know,
presidential candidate ever now.
is he? Yeah. I mean,
Now that Biden dropped out.
you've got like some of the people in power are like you would. I mean, I hope to God when I'm that age that I'm retired. You
Trump
know?
and Biden were the oldest candidates last time they were both
Yeah,
around.
yeah. That's insane.
And
Yeah.
they're still
No
both
matter
back
who
at it.
won last time, it would have been the oldest president ever. And now here they go again.
Have you seen the movie JFK?
No. Is
You
that
should you should watch it. It's 3 hours long. It's a bit of an investment, but it basically just goes into like JFK assassination. Absolutely, some sort of conspiracy was involved. Who knows exactly who was involved? Whatever. But you know, the end of it is something I really like. They said like JFK's death was kind of like the death of like the hope for a new America. Like JFK was going to be like this progressive guy. He wanted us like out of Vietnam. He wanted to like increase like the civil rights movement, things like that. And then they killed him. It's like, all right, if you,
what year was he shot? Was it like 64, 67, something like that?
I was thinking 69.
Oh, it might have been 69. Yeah, I'll look it up real quick.
I think like everything happened in 1969, dude. I
Yeah,
think
that was
that
when
was
we were on the moon. I know that, or
yeah,
at least we said we were on the
that
moon.
was also Woodstock.
Oh, he was shot in 63.
63. Okay.
And I knew it was 60 something. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know he was like, and that back in the day, the Democratic Party and Republican Party were obviously much different. And I feel like RFK is kind of similar to JFK, and just in the sense that he's kind of calling out like a lot of the establishment bullshit.
Well, everything after that was when all the alphabet boys really took control
Yeah,
of everything.
yeah,
JFK said
exactly
he was going to
right.
smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and then like a month later, he was dead.
Yeah, and then that was followed by 20 something years of the Cold War where they just gained more and more power, and now here we are.
Speaking of power, you know, I think it's important to like try and locate where it comes from. It's a tricky
Okay,
thing to
I like
it's a
that.
tricky thing to do, but I want to ask you a question. This is actually from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I know you haven't seen it, so this will
Yeah,
be
no, I haven't. Well, I've
this
seen
will,
some of it. I haven't seen all of it.
this will probably be new to you. So it's question gets posed. Four men stand in a room. One of them is a mercenary sellsword with a sword in his hand. The first of the three great men in the room with him is the king. And the king says to him, as your lord, as your king, I demand you to strike down the other two men in this room. If you do, I will make you one of my vassal lords, give you land, and you will be following all the rules of the land if you listen to me. The second person is the wealthiest person in the kingdom. He says, if you strike down these other two men, I will make you one of the wealthiest men alive. The third person in the room is the high priest of the religion. And he says, I demand you to strike down these other two men. God has ordained me to tell you this. If you follow me, I will ensure you a spot in heaven. Who does the sellsword listen to?
Is it all right? Is it like an isolated environment? Those are the only
Yes,
four.
there's four people in the room, locked doors.
So all right, I would guess just because I know it's a bit of a riddle. I would guess that it's if it comes to who has the power in this situation. I would guess that he either kills all of them or none of them because he's the one holding the sword. Therefore, none of them really have any power over him at the time. Or am I thinking about that wrong?
It's just a question. You can think about it any way you want. So you think the guy with the sword has the power, though?
In that scenario, but that's what I mean. Is it isolated? Because if you know, in that scenario, the guy with the sword has if he's the only one with the sword,
He
he's the
is.
one with the power. That's why they're all begging him. Oh yeah, that's why they're asking him. You got to do it. Like, can you? Like, they're telling him, hey, I'll give you whatever. I'll give you anything you
Who
want.
who does he listen to?
Does he? Is it not? Is it none of them? Is that the answer?
There's no answer. It's a question. Who do you think the man listens to?
If it was me, I might take the money. I might listen to the money man.
So assume he listens to the guy with the money.
All
Who
right,
had
but
the
then I
who
guess the money
who had
might be
who
worthless
who
when
had
there's
the
no king.
who had the power? The guy with the money or the guy
The
with the
guy with the
sword?
sword had the power. That is my final answer. He had the power to choose at least.
Does have the power to choose, but money has power over him.
Okay, so what's the moral of the story here?
So you said if it was me, I would listen to the wealthy man, right? And that's kind of how you got to think about it. If it's some random guy, who does he pick? You don't know. You don't
Right.
know
You
this
don't know
guy's
what he wants more. What's his desire? His desire
you
has the
don't know
power.
this guy's convictions. You don't know what he holds as valuable. Maybe he thinks, oh, he's the king. I gotta listen to the king. He's a man of authority. He's like,
Yeah.
the king's the authority in the situation. I gotta listen to him. Maybe he's a very pious man. He says, oh fuck, I don't want to be on God's bad side. I gotta kill the other two guys. Or maybe he's a 21st century, person living in a capitalist society like me and you who would take the money, right?
Aha, I see. All right. I
The
like that.
moral of the story is power resides where men believe it resides. It's a
Right.
trick, a shadow on the wall.
I could see it. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking after your explanation there, I was thinking like it really, I mean, especially in a civilized society, your own desires are what has the power over you, or you can either your desires can have the power over you, or you can have the power over them. Meaning like who knows how much, and this is kind of an interesting thing too, is like who knows how much choice you have over your own actions,
Free will versus
or are you
determinism
following?
is a topic we could probably do an entire episode on for sure. That's a thought that I've had.
True, and
Um,
I do think a bit of both exist. I think it depends on. I think if you are, I think there are people who are capable of overcoming their own impulsive desires to try to make the choice to benefit themselves in the long run. But it does take a lot of.
there might be, but at a certain point, I've gone through this scenario a ton in my head. at a certain point, it might always be your desires winning out because, okay, my desire pops up right now. I want to drink 7 beers and sit on the couch, whatever, right? That's my
Hmm.
desire. But then the next thought that pops into your head is, no, what I actually want to do is go eat a good meal, work out, and read my book. They're both your desires.
What about say there's some, which realistic scenario, say there's someone who is say a single mom or a single dad who might have who might have kids who maybe they have a mental disability or something like that where they'll never ever be independent. So I can see the argument of, oh, well, if you have a kid, but you continue to work day in, day out to support your kid, that's because your desire is for them to, then be happy and be able to be independent. But what if that's never the case, where it's more so along the lines of like, no matter what I do, the result will probably be the same, but I have a responsibility to do this even though I don't like it at all, I don't want to do it. I would desire to be drinking with my boys right
So you
now,
you you desire two things in that scenario. You desire to be rid of that responsibility,
rid of the
right?
guilt. Okay.
You
Or
want to absolve yourself of this responsibility, but then there's the other desire to be a good person, to do right by your child. And it's just one desire winning out over the other once again.
okay, so the desire to be okay, that's a good way. So the desire, so even someone who does something they don't want to do, but they think it's right, it's not that they chose to overcome their desire not to do it. It's just that their desire to be good or moral
Was
outweighs their
out,
desire to
yes,
have what to do
right,
whatever else they're going to do.
right.
It's an interesting take. All right, I like this conversation. Um,
And there's good and bad in all of us, right? Heinous things pop into our heads sometimes. Where does that come from? Did we consciously think that up? Do thoughts come from the ether? Does that stem from our subconscious? Is that your true self coming through? And then your conscious self has to fight against these impulses? I don't really know. But I
so
think
where does the desire come from? Is the question where it's
we don't know. From the
because
ether.
the desire to do good specifically, even when it's a sacrifice, that one seems that one's a tough one because you can see obviously like, all right, yeah, my desire to eat a hamburger right now,
Right.
evolutionary
Right.
biology, we're wired to, survival and reproduction. I feel like eating a hamburger. That's because I was wired that way to get hungry and want to eat food. That all makes a lot of sense. I think, and this is one that we could definitely go on for a while, is I think that desire to be good may stem from some form of religion, whether it's the religion that we currently believe in now, as the Bible versus the Quran, or if it's even ancient religions that might be totally different than what we even consider religion now, but some form of community religion that was ingrained into generations and generations of prehistoric and pre agricultural revolution societies.
I still think altruism can be explained biologically, though. Helping out
Okay.
your neighbor helps you out, right? Humans as a species, what was our number one capability? Communication, teamwork, right? We were able to band together and overcome basically everything else in nature, right?
Hmm.
And that initial form of tribalism and camaraderie can easily be bred into us over generation upon generation, altruistic genes, altruistic tendencies. And I think that's easily explainable. I don't think you need, I think that
I don't think
more,
you need to believe in God to be altruistic, but
I
I do
think,
think it did play a role in that. Well, here,
I
let me.
think religion gets its morality from us, not the other way around.
Interesting. I think yeah, in a way, yes, absolutely. I would put it the way of, so one thing about, you hit it on the head exactly. What separates us from the animals is kind of our ability to be altruistic, not so obviously, if you needed my help, I would help you out. I know you really well. We were childhood friends, right?
Right.
But and the animals will do that too. If there's a tribe, they'll help each other out. But one difference between human, that separated us from the animals, at least back in those days, was until domestication, was that we were able to. I would be willing to help out another human who I've never met before, and I don't even know whether this person's trying to attack me, trying to steal from me, but I'd be able to trust them, and the reason why, and the difference between the way our minds worked and the animals worked was that we were able to conceive of things that weren't actually there and communicate those things because of our
Yes.
complex language.
Yes.
And back in prehistoric times, say there's two tribes walking past each other. And if there were two tribes of, say, wolves, they might either run away or attack, or there'd be some mistrust there. But with humans, what they could do is they can point to God. They can, someone can say something. Do you worship these gods? And if they did, that means that they were raised with the same stories, which means that they were probably ingrained with the same morals, which means that they were probably a trustworthy tribe that they can at least trust not to, kill them and steal all their stuff. That's just the way that I've learned it, which may or may not be 100% accurate. I'm sure there's some missing pieces in there as well.
Our ability to forecast into the future was absolutely critical and massive. We can foresee, as you said, things that could be, not the way things are. And that's a
Okay.
huge part of our society still. We need to discuss the way things could be. Things need not be the way they've always been. So when people say, like, we're stuck in this fraudulent system, there's no way out, that attacks us and our basic integrity, our ability to essentially forge our own path, our ability to use our mind's eye, say, I think this could be a better way to do things and act accordingly.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. I agree. That's why I like having these conversations too, is because a lot of times, especially when it gets into politics and stuff, have conversation and it turns into an argument because you start talking to people who are only trying to defend their point, which yes, sometimes I'm trying to defend my point, but I'm not trying to do that to prove you wrong or to show you, hey, you need to come turn over and be on my side, or to say you're evil or something if we disagree. The reason I'm defending my point is to say, like, hey, but you're missing, you have an argument, but it's missing this part, and this is, and I feel like that's, even though it sounds hostile a lot, or it seems like it's hostile a lot, that is so important because as a collective society, what we're doing is we are trying to arrive at a solution to fix what's broken. Because one thing we all agree on is that something's broken. That's why we're always arguing all the time. So it's like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, that I think that is what whether we notice it or not, just as a collective, I think that's what we're trying to do when it comes to, you know, arguments in the comment sections and stuff like that. I think that's what's going on really is a collective society of humans, a global society really, all trying to grapple with, life's just the mysteries and the problems that we're currently facing.
Yeah, and it once again just comes back to communication. We need to have these types of debates, these types of talks. We need to have open forums for people all across the world potentially to be able to
Hmm.
discuss topics like I think it would be very prudent to get people from the Middle East from their get their opinion on what's going on in this war right now.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
no,
that would I
more
think that would
opinions are
help out a
better for sure.
lot. Like get people's opinions who are actually there on the ground, getting opinions from people, maybe in Europe and Asia, what their countries, how they feel about the situation. If 300 some countries agree on something, it seems like maybe that's probably the way to go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like kind of a macro democracy where globally, one thing that's pretty cool that's going to maybe hopefully open up some doors to that is all these AI translators now. Where you got the glasses and all the stuff where you can translate so easy. That's something we've never had. Where you used to. I just saw a video of like it was like something going on in China, and they were translating all of it, and it was like, oh, that's kind of crazy. That's it's all the way across the country. We imagine being in like the 19, you know. 50s or 60s. You have no idea what the hell is going on over there. You don't know if these people are anything like us at all. No
Right.
idea what they're saying, and people can manipulate that. They can politicians can use propaganda. Oh yeah, they're over there. They hate us. They've done that up until they did that after 9/11. They've done that. They've
They're
been
still
doing that.
doing it. They're
They're
still
still
doing
doing it, and it's like we're if we can finally get it where it's that easy to translate, where I can just listen to someone speaking another language, get it translated by technology, and there's no middleman who can manipulate it. There's no media behind. I feel like that might be a real quick change where hopefully in a good way.
hmm
But I guess you never know.
Could be a game changer. All right, I think we're in a pretty good spot here.
Good spot to leave it off. All right, yeah, no,
Leave it
this
off.
was a good one
All
for
right.
sure. All right,
Thanks for listening, everyone. You guys
all
tune
right.
back in.
Until next time.